Well, hello everyone. um, how are you all today? It's been a little bit of a trick getting baby talk to happen. I even got on today and the camera wasn't working. So for those of you that were anticipating Baby Talk Tuesday this week, thanks for hanging in there. And here we are. We're starting. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Cara Wright, and I'm a birth practitioner, access consciousness facilitator, and creator of Baby Talk. And I do these talks every week about a different perspective about babies. And for all of June, and also whenever it asks to be spoke to, for June, we're going to be talking about you know, babies, conception, spirit babies, like, are you aware of your babies before they actually show up physically for you? I was getting a lot of questions from people that are like, help, I have a baby in my awareness. I have a baby that's communicating with me. I'm not interested in becoming pregnant. What do I do? Which is always just like, it's such a, becoming a parent, becoming a mom for sure is a big choice. It's a big choice if you're someone who it's a big choice for anyone. And there's so many different variations of how it can show up. And like I said, I was getting a lot of people asking me to speak to the fact that they're aware of a being in their environment, in their periphery that is desiring to come and be their child, but they're not actually either ever wanting to be a mom, or maybe they're just not in the right, they're not actually with the person that they would like to parent with, or they're not ready yet. It also is the other direction, and I will be speaking to that later on in the month too, where like for me personally, what I experienced was I was ready and I was trying and I was really aware of these beings, and physically my body couldn't get pregnant. And so that's a whole other bag of um, it's a completely different conversation. So I thought today we would kind of talk a little bit about all of it, like are you crazy or are you actually aware of these beings? My experience is you're aware of them. And honestly, when I actually got the information, because for a lot of the time, like for those of you who don't know my story, I literally found access bars, which was what started my journey into becoming an access consciousness certified facilitator. That's a large mouthful. But when I found bars, I actually had been trying to get pregnant for upwards of 6 years. And, like in the beginning of getting pregnant, it was kind of like, oh, well, I'm just going to go off birth control. Um, and it'll happen, and 6 months go by and a year goes by. And in the beginning, it wasn't that big of a deal. But of course, as that journey progressed, it became quite a big deal. And I ended up at the end of it being very not kind of a mess. A lot of anxiety, a lot of panic attacks, a lot of depression. Wasn't really in my right mind. Some of that was just from the stress of it, from the years of it, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, I freaking tried everything to conceive, everything that worked for me to conceive. Um, and it never happened. And so I found myself in this really weird position. And I was aware of a lot of stuff. I was aware of a lot of people's points of view, but I also was really aware of these beings who were there in my space, who were desiring to come and be my and my husband's children. And so it was like every time I didn't get pregnant every month, I basically would be aware of my upset. I would be aware of their upset. And I didn't really know that I was aware of them at the time. And I'm so grateful that I found access bars. Um, I tried a lot of different modalities to get pregnant, like from nutrition to herbs to homeopathy to acupuncture to, hormone replacement to yeah, a lot. I tried a lot. Um, But when I found bars, it was really more for me, and it was really more for, like, bars. Access bars was the one thing that actually allowed me to get through what had been an emotional toll on me, mentally, physically, emotionally, all of the things. And so with access bars, there's so many things that you start to become aware of, right? Because bars, one of the things bars does is it actually allows you to start to be more present with what you're aware of. And I always knew there was more going on. Are you someone who knows there's more going, there's more to the story? Like, I always knew it. I have always been a seeker. I have always been somebody who knows there are things that are unseen, that I perceived. Like, I have always just known that there's more than what the eyes can see. Like, I just have always known that. And one of the things that created so much space for me was this awareness that I wasn't just aware of my own upset every month when I didn't get pregnant. I was also aware of these beings that were that were desiring to be my children. And so they would get upset and I would get upset, and it was a mess. Now, that can actually show up too with women who, they're really aware of these beings, and these beings are like, hello, 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 knocking on the door. Like, I want to come and be your child. Now, why do, how does that happen? Like, why are there beings that are there to be born to you? Sometimes it's simply just a choice. Like, they desire to have you be their parent, for a myriad of reasons. Sometimes they desire the gentleman that you're, creating the opportunity with. I'll just put it lightly like that. Maybe sometimes it's them. Maybe you as a woman is just like, well, I really desire that that being as my dad. And we have, like, for those of you that may or may not believe in um multiple lifetimes, I do believe that we have experiences with people. We have experiences with people over multiple different lifetimes, and these beings are coming oftentimes because there's some sort of connection you have with them. You may have made an agreement. They may just, want to be your child this lifetime. Like, there's so many different variations and variants. And that's really where this conversation, I felt, needed to begin. Because for those of you who are aware of these beings in whatever way that you're aware of them, first of all, like, would you be willing to acknowledge you are aware of them and you're not crazy? Um, and how are you aware of them? It's different for everyone. Sometimes you're just like, thoughts will flow through your head that they're not really your thoughts. You know that that's not how you see the world or present the world, or they're not you. Sometimes that's how they're communicating with you. Sometimes these beings will communicate with pictures. They'll communicate to you in dreams. When you're sleeping at night, you'll just get awarenesses, because when we're in bed at night, all of those things that we, put around us to pretend that we're not aware of, the unseen world. Uh, when you go to bed at night, and at nighttime, many of us kind of relax those barriers. And so that's why oftentimes, for those of you that are aware of the spirit world or the unseen world, it's way more active at night. Stuff is way more like, have you ever wondered that? Like, why is stuff always so intense at night? Like, if something's really going to freak you out, it's going to be at night. It's like, because there is this, like, natural relaxation, and you relax those barriers and you start to really be aware of what's going on around you. And sometimes that's beings that are like, hey, I'm ready. I'm ready to come and be your child. Um, the thing that I would say is, for those of you, because this is what I'm focusing today's baby talk on. We'll talk more about some of the other elements, but for those of you who are really aware of these beings, and these beings are very persistent and consistent, because they're just like people. Sometimes they'll be in the periphery and you won't ever even be aware of them until you conceive, and then you start to get a sense of them, and you start to pick up on their personalities. And then there are some that, like, are very evident, and they're very persistent, and they're very loud. They're very bossy. I mean, they're just like people, it's like there's some people that walk into a room, you don't even know they're there. There's some people that they're walking into the room before they even get there. Exactly the same. And so, first of all, like start to be like, instead of pushing away the awareness that you're having that there's a being there that is asking to be your child, but because you're not ready, or either you're not ready or you don't ever want children, you're just like, I can't hear you. That's not necessarily your best choice, by the way, because beans can be kind of tricky. They can be tricky. They can actually, they're part of the creation of everything. So, like, like Gary Douglas always says, they put the bodies together and create the body that they desire. I mean, meaning they put you and the person you're conceiving with together, and they create their bodies. And sometimes they just get tired of waiting and they just go for it. And if you're checked out enough, you're not going to have any really say in it. And sometimes they're really tricky. Like there's women who don't even perceive a being. Like they'll be pregnant for a while and still not really perceive a being. Now that could just be that being is very quiet and spacious, and they don't have a lot of like I said, they're just like people. Or it could be that they know that if you knew they were there, you might not desire them to be there. So they're tricky. um but the more you're actually willing to not ignore this and to like not pretend like you're not aware of what you're aware of, and you're actually willing to be present with it, like, hey, I see you, like, like however that communication is. And it could just simply be like, I'm aware of you. And be able to say, like, hey, not now. Or be able to say, hey, not ever. And then just start that dialogue of like, hey, what is it that you're actually looking for? Like, start asking questions. Now, are you going to get like an auditory response answered, like question response? Sometimes people have that. Mostly it's going to be an awareness in a sense, like one of the things that you can do, because if they've been really wanting to come and you've been really like, you don't exist, I'm not perceiving you, you've been a bit stubborn in your like, I'm going to not acknowledge that you're there talking to me, they'll get really up in your face. Like literally, they'll get really, 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 really close to you. And once that starts to happen, which is one of the things that was happening for me, was that they were so in my space that I couldn't tell the difference between me and them. I couldn't tell the difference between what was my point of view or my upset, and what was their point of view and their upset. Like I could not distinguish, because they were like, because we were all like in this to win this. Like we were all like, my body was the only one going, everything else was just like. And so one of the things that I started to do is when I started to actually like, first of all, acknowledge that I was aware of them. And that was such a huge gift too, because I was really judging myself for the amount of upset and stress and disappointment and all the things that I would go into. And when I realized it was me also being aware of them, it gave me more space to be like, to be more kind with myself and with them, and more gentle with myself and with them. Like when I realized it wasn't just me, I was very, and unfortunately I can still say this now, like I tend to be hard on myself. I tend to be like, stiff upper lip, you got to be bigger than that. Like I tend to push myself. And when I actually started to realize, hey, this is a bigger conversation, like this, there's more than just me involved here, that actually allowed me to be softer with myself. Because I think one of the biggest things that occurs with women, whether it's you're aware of these babies and you're not wanting to get pregnant, or you're wanting to get pregnant and it's not happening and you're aware of these babies, is the amount of fucking pressure and intensity and hardness you put on yourself rivals none. I was harder on myself than I would ever be on anyone else. And so I think when you have this ability to go like, wait a second, what am I actually aware of? If this wasn't all me, like, and honestly, it's that asking a question like, okay, so is this all? when you're having a big response or a big emotion, or you're having this like, no, like whatever you're having, like ask is this me, or is there other beings involved? Yes or no? And feeling into like what's lighter. You remember one of the things that I learned very early on in Access, and I still use this every friggin' day, is what's true for you is light. What's a lie is heavy. And so one of the things we do is we ask questions. We ask a lot of questions like, okay, truth, is this mine? Is this the being that's here to be my child? What's lighter? That's how you start to distinguish between like, is this my point of view, or is this their point of view? Is this my emotion, or is their emotion? Like, because a lot of times women get very confused because they know they don't desire to have children, but this being so desires to be their kid, they're like, that is more loud in their world than their choice. And so in order for you to like really truly remain in your own choice, because how many people, and this is like I really really desired to be a mom. I really did. um and there's a lot of women who, and it never happened for me, but there's a lot of women who they live with a lot of like intensity and shame, and like in their own worlds, very secret, because they didn't really desire to be a mom, and here they are with children. Like, how the fuck did that happen? I mean, we know how it happens, but it's like there's so much here, and there's so much where a woman can just get kind of like lost in the tsunami of all things. Is this mine? Is this theirs? And like I said, when they're there to be part of your life, they're really loud, they're really close, they're really, so not only can you start asking questions, ask them to step back, literally step away from me a little bit, so I can actually have some space to start to know what's mine, what's theirs. Because it really is like, it's like, how is it when you have your kids, and they have a desire for something and you have a desire for something? You have to have that. I mean, oftentimes it's a friggin' negotiation, right? You like that starts sooner than you think. That starts sooner than you think. And so, for those of you who are really aware of these beings, who are really up in your face, and you're like, not now or not ever, first of all, acknowledge that you're not making that shit up. That's actually going on. Ask them to step back. You need to step back, because bottom line is, you get to choose. If you're willing to be present with you and your body, you get to choose. You're in the body. You're the one that's like contributing the DNA. If you're a woman, you're contributing your body to that whole process of having that baby. You get to choose. Like, you get to choose. You just have to have the willingness to be like, know that, and have your own back in that regard, and ask them to step back and then begin the conversation. Like, what is it that you desire? What is it, like, for those of you that aren't really desiring to have a child, and this child is really like, ask them, like, what is your target? Like, what is your agenda? Like, why me? Not saying why me, but like start to ask them questions so you can get the awareness of where they're functioning from, because sometimes it's an outdated point of view. Sometimes it's not actually correct. Just because they're not in a body doesn't mean that they can see everything. They don't know more than you. They're not aware of more about you than you are about you. So you are truly having a conversation, and you can start to get clear of like, you know, and you can say to them, there's so many different things. And sometimes it's like, hey, like, I'm not going to have you, but like, maybe you have a sister who wants to have babies. Like, hey, you could be your auntie. I'm happy to do that. And you can just give them that information. It's one of the things that I like realized when I was a doula and I was going into births, and I started realizing that I was communicating with babies. Like, I realized that it wasn't enough to know in my own head what was required. Like, if I could say to the being, hey, your body, the baby, like if I could say to the baby, you got to move your body, say the baby's flipped the wrong way and it's causing something going on the birth. Like, I realize that they need like like they require that information. And if you can deliver the information, whether it's like visually or even just like, like energetically, then they have the information to do something different. They can make a different choice. That's really what you're doing. You're like, okay, cool. Like if you start to get the energy of what that being is desiring, it may not even be that you can deliver what they think you can deliver. Like you won't know until you start asking these questions. And and it may be that they, that and you can say to them, "Hey, well, what about this?" You can give them different perspectives and different areas to choose from. And so that is really like it's as crazy as that sounds. Try it and see what shows up. Like just try it. You don't have to tell anyone you're doing it. I won't tell anyone you're doing it. I will zip it and keep a secret. Like no one needs to know you just listened to this and no one needs to know that you're doing it. But if you are someone who does not desire to get pregnant and you are aware of a being, I would recommend it. Because like I said, they're tricky and they can just kind of like work their way in there and then there you are, You can't really unring a baby bell, once the baby rings that bell. So um that's my suggestion. This is my little wacky, weird baby talk. Next Tuesday, we're going to be going into some even more in depth things. So please join me if this is something that's interesting to you. If you know anyone who this would be a really amazing conversation for them to listen to and be aware of, please share. And if you are someone who has this going on in your world and you don't feel 100% confident you can have this conversation on your own, I do work with people and do private sessions. So you can PM me and we can get you on the books and we can do a session together because I am more than willing to be the negotiator. So I hope you guys are having an amazing Wednesday. I will see you next Tuesday on Baby Talk Tuesday. And it's just always a pleasure to come on here and talk about the things, the weird and wacky things that I'm aware of. So we'll see you next week.